She never asked for anything, never confessed, never complained. She loved him in silence, until the day her silence became the loudest voice in his life, and the world finally listened. The city never sleeps, not because it's restless, but because it's filled with souls who are. Among them was Mustafa Kamal, a man in his early 30s who walked with purpose, spoke with clarity, and smiled like he knew the secret to something others missed. To the world, he was the kind of man who had it all: a rising entrepreneur, a self-made speaker, and the founder of a non-profit that uplifted hundreds. But no one saw the quiet force behind his ri. Her name was Saharish. She wasn't a partner in business. She wasn't the face behind any brand. But she was the silence that held his storms, the voice he never acknowledged publicly, and the constant that never changed. Even when everything else did. They had met in their late 20s at a writer's workshop. Mustafa was a guest speaker. Saharish, a participant who barely said a word. But when she read out her short story about a girl who loved a boy from behind the curtain of time, Mustafa didn't clap like the others. He stood up, walked over, and simply said, "You write like you've lived 1,000 lives." That sentence changed something. They began meeting often, not romantically, but with a bond so deep even silence felt like a conversation. Mustafa spoke about his dreams, his fears, his struggles with being seen as strong all the time. Saharish just listened. Sometimes she spoke, mostly through her writings, and those writings slowly became the voice behind his speeches, the metaphors in his blogs, and the soul of his campaigns. But no one knew. She never asked for credit. She never even hinted at it. She just watched him grow from the first stage to global ones. Every post he published, every book he released, had pieces of her in them. Yet her name was nowhere. It didn't hurt her, not in the beginning. Because for Saharish, love wasn't about being known. It was about being there. It was about holding him up when the world was watching him soar. She believed, truly believed, that some people were meant to be the wind beneath wings, not the wings themselves. Mustafa knew she was important. He once told a friend, "She's the calm after my chaos." But he never told her that, perhaps because he thought she already knew. Perhaps because he was too busy trying to build an empire on purpose, not realizing that he was stepping over the NLI foundation that had never cracked. Years passed. Success grew. Media interviews, TED Talks, books, applause, and with every milestone, Saharish smiled a little softer. Not because she was unhappy, but because she had begun to feel like a ghost in the life she helped create. One evening, she messaged him, "Do you ever feel like something's missing?" He replied hours later, "Not really. Why?" She didn't answer. That was the first time she felt her silence not being heard. It echoed in her bones. And something shifted. The city lights sparkled brightly, but Mustafa Kamal's life remained cloaked in darkness. His routine was hollow: work, loneliness, and an empty heart. Every day he walked through crowds of faces, but none had the eyes that brought him peace. On the other hand was Saharish, silent, dignified, and broken from within. Her smile fooled people, but her eyes always told the truth. Each day she taught school children about the meaning of life while struggling to find her own. Mustafa Kamal often sat in his balcony gazing at the night sky. One evening, when the wind felt slightly melancholic and carried the scent of unfulfilled wishes, he spotted Saharish walking on the street below. She walked just like she used to, as if every step told a story. The next day, Mustafa gathered the courage to wait for her outside the school. "Saharish?" he called softly. She stopped. For a moment, her eyes reflected surprise, pain, and an old memory. "Mustafa?" Silence fell between them. The same silence that had once nurtured their dreams and now returned as an echo of the past. They sat down at a nearby tea stall. Conversation was awkward at first, like a dam holding back feelings, but gradually it melted. Their silence made way for healing. Saharish shared, "My father married me to a man I barely knew. It was never a relationship. Time passed, but I merely existed in that bond. I never lived." Mustafa replied gently, "After you left, I buried myself in work. I survived, but I never truly lived either." Tears welled up in Saharish's eyes, but a soft smile crossed her lips. "Do you think life gives second chances?" Mustafa said, "If your intentions are pure and pain has softened your soul, then yes." That moment, that gaze, that silence, everything felt blessed, like the universe itself was pausing to witness this reunion. From then on, they started meeting more often. They shared time at parks, relived childhood memories, and in silence, they said everything words couldn't express. Saharish spoke less, but her silence meant everything to Mustafa. He had learned that her quiet was full of love buried for years, now speaking through silence. One day, Saharish said, "If time could go back, I would never have left you." Mustafa gently held her hand. "Time moves forward, Saharish, but we can still paint it with new colors." In that moment, time seemed to bless them. But life never stays simple. Just when things began to heal, fate knocked again. Saharish's husband, gone abroad for years, suddenly returned. It hit her like a storm. Mustafa didn't need to ask. He saw it in her eyes, that same fear that had once taken everything from them. She whispered, "Maybe we are going to lose again?" Mustafa replied, looking into her soul, "Love never loses, Saharish. Time just wins sometimes." Days turned into weeks and the city seemed to move faster than ever. But for Saharish, time had slowed. Every hour without hearing from Mustafa Kamal felt like a drop of water echoing in an empty room. Her silence became heavier, like an anchor pulling her deeper into reflection. She didn't chase him, didn't call him, not because she didn't want to, but because she understood that love sometimes means letting someone walk away, even if it tears you apart. Meanwhile, Mustafa Kamal had thrown himself into work. He was determined to prove something, not to the world, but to himself. He started working late, skipping meals, accepting every challenge thrown his way. Promotions followed. His name started appearing in magazines. Investors respected him. But inside, he felt nothing, like a man standing on top of a mountain but too exhausted to enjoy the view. At night, when everything was quiet, his mind betrayed him. He would think about Saharish, her quiet understanding, the way she smiled without saying much, how her presence had been his calm in chaos. But ego has a strange voice. It told him to keep moving, not to look back. "You've made it this far without her," it whispered. "Why return now?" And yet, no matter how loud success shouted, it couldn't silence the absence she left. On Saharish's side, life had taken its own turn. She started volunteering at a local school for underprivileged children. Her quiet love, the same love that had once nurtured Mustafa's dreams, now became the voice of encouragement for those who had none. She told them stories of resilience, of heartbreak, of rising after falling. The children adored her, but they didn't know she was speaking from her own silent wounds. One day, while organizing a book donation drive at the school, she picked up a magazine to line the tables. Her hand froze. There he was, Mustafa Kamal, on the cover, smiling, confident, successful. The headline read, "From silence to success, the man who built without noise." She stared at it for a long moment, not with regret, not with longing, but with a strange blend of pride and ache. In that moment, she realized something profound. She hadn't lost him. She had given him space to find himself, and perhaps that was the truest form of love. To stay quiet when everything inside you is screaming to hold on. But fate wasn't done with them yet. A few months later, Mustafa was invited to speak at a leadership conference. The topic, what defines a legacy? He stepped on stage in front of hundreds of people. Cameras rolled, lights burned, but all he could think of was her. He began his speech not with a quote, not with a joke, but with a pause. And then he said, "There was a woman who once believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. She never asked for anything. She never demanded love. She just gave it, silently, constantly, fully. I thought I needed the world. I thought success would fill the void, but now I know. It was her silence that shaped my storm into something stronger. If legacy means being remembered, then I hope she remembers me, kindly." The crowd was silent. Some were in tears. The speech went viral, but Saharish didn't watch it online. She was in the audience, not by invitation, by coincidence. One of the school trustees had gifted her the ticket. She had no idea he would be there. As the hall emptied, Mustafa saw her at the back. Their eyes met. No one moved. No one spoke. The world, for that one moment, held its breath. He walked towards her. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply whispered, "I heard you." And for the first time in his life, he didn't feel the need to say anything, because she had always heard him, even when the world didn't. They walked side by side out of the auditorium, saying little. The silence between them wasn't awkward anymore. It was warm, full of things that didn't need to be said. Outside, the city hummed with life, but they moved slowly, like time was stretching for them. Mustafa Kamal offered to drop Saharish home. She accepted with a quiet nod. The car ride was silent too, but it wasn't empty. He glanced at her hands resting on her lap, remembering all the times those same hands had held his broken pieces together without him even noticing. At her doorstep, she turned to him. "It's late," she said gently. He nodded, understanding she wasn't inviting him in. Not yet. There were still things unsaid, still time needed. "Will I see you again?" he asked. "Maybe," she replied with a soft smile. "If you're not looking for applause." He nodded, watching her disappear behind the door, and for the first time he didn't feel rejected. He felt grounded. In the following weeks, Mustafa didn't rush. He didn't bombard her with calls or messages. He respected the space between them, just as she once had for him. Instead, he continued his work, but now with a new sense of purpose. His speeches became more honest, his writing more human. He talked not just of ambition, but of grace, of mistakes, of silent strength. Saharish, on the other hand, found herself smiling more. She didn't know what the future held with Mustafa, and she wasn't waiting. She had become more than someone who loved in silence. She had become someone who learned how to love herself back too. Then came the day Mustafa launched a scholarship foundation for students who had been misunderstood in school, misjudged for being quiet or different. He named it the Saharish Trust. When she found out, she didn't call him. She simply showed up at the ceremony wearing a plain white dress and carrying a single flower. Their eyes met again. This time, no crowd was around them. No stage, no applause, just them. "You remembered," she said. "I never forgot," he replied. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them away. "Why now?" "Because I had to build myself enough to stand beside you," he answered honestly. Their hands met, not in a dramatic embrace, but in something firmer, a quiet promise. Years passed. They didn't marry in a grand wedding hall. There were no viral pictures, no trending hashtags, just a few close friends, a quiet garden, and two people who understood that love is not noise, it's presence. They traveled, taught together, wrote together. And even on days when they didn't speak much, they felt heard, and every year on the same date, they would revisit the auditorium where it all began, the night her silence was finally heard. They would sit in the back row, hand in hand. No words, just the quiet. And in that silence lived everything they had ever been through. The story teaches that sometimes the loudest love is the one that never demands to be heard. Real strength lies not in how loudly you speak, but in how deeply you're understood. She loved him silently, until the world heard her silence, and so did he.